Welcome back to my art channel. It's time for another review. You've probably seen me use a variety of colored pencils for sketches and color studies, and I've gushed about specific shades from specific brands all the time. That's because, until now, I only collected colors from open stock selections at art shops. It's given me a wide range of different textures and a feel for what I like, but not exactly a good range of available colors. So when Arrtx reached out to me about testing their 126 color set of colored pencils, that was the perfect opportunity to finally add a wide range of colors to my collection of art supplies. Thank you Arrtx for sending me this set. These shipped really well packaged, though maybe by the sheer chaos of Lunar New Year packages, the box still had a slight dent. Overall though, my first impression of the packaging is positive. Care was taken with protective shipping materials, the cardboard box these pencils come in is beautiful and doesn't feel flimsy, and I overall appreciate the idea behind this packaging concept. Especially if you're working on a cramped surface, this vertical arrangement of pencils is really handy. Though while the packaging concept is wonderful, I did see some issues with the execution. Some of the foam indents for the pencils have irregular sizes. So while some fit the pencils perfectly, some are too large and thus the pencils wobble a lot. And transporting the box to and from my desk did feel a bit precarious as well. The colored pencils themselves have a 3.88 wax-based core and arrived in great condition. All the pencil cores are centered perfectly, which is important to me when sharpening them. I also had zero issues with splintering, grumbling, or breakage of any kind while swatching and drawing. I don't like my colored pencils to be too thin, and these feel really good to hold and sketch with. I'd really recommend you swatch these, as the color swatches on the back of the packaging aren't an accurate representation of each shade. That's something I've noticed with colored pencils across brands, by the way. It seems to be one of the hardest media to properly depict as either a digital color representation or photograph of an actual swatch. The swatch list here on the back of the packaging only notes the pencil numbers, not the color names. That's another reason to give these a proper swatch sheet. I found that light colored or metallic lettering on colored pencils of all kinds can rub off and fade quite easily, so these might become harder to read with time. One more reason to swatch them. The color of the pencil wrap is a pretty accurate match when it comes to the browns, greens and blues, but I found that for the yellows, I needed the color swatches to identify which color to use. All of these first impressions aside, let's get to color swatches. I'll talk about the overall application and texture more during the drawing process. Let's focus on colors here. My first thought was, that's a lot of yellows, as I kept swatching more and more of them. Arrtx created a variety of yellow shades here, but yellow in general is a tricky one. While you can shift the hues around, the range of darkness you can go to is quite limited. As soon as you go too dark, you enter the ochre and brown territory. I found that no matter what medium I work in, the yellow color range seems to be the one with the most overlap when it comes to curated sets. I took a look at the 72 color set of Arrtx colored pencils as well. All 72 colors are included in this set here, by the way, and saw that the number of yellow shades is still really high there, so the 126 color set definitely has an overall better color balance. I kept track of different color families as I kept on swatching. We have around 15 yellow shades, plus the fluorescent yellow, but I'm excluding those neon shades from my count. 16 total of like orange to red hues, 15 total pink, purple and violet shades, 22 blue shades, or more if you count turquoise, more towards blue than green, and then a really beautiful assortment of 26 green shades. These distinctions can be a bit arbitrary. When does a blue turn violet? When is a red a brown? I counted 15 brown shades, but some of those dark purples, aubergine and brass colors could have just as well also counted as browns too, so I'm really just trying to get an overall impression of the balance here. The names for these colored pencils are great. While I love fun or evocative color names on occasion, sticking to a lot of traditional pigment names makes it easier to remember specific shades. Crimson red, scarlet red, carmine red, all of these you might be familiar with from painting and drawing in other art media. The occasional non-pigment name like antique brass or peach puff are descriptive and evocative and fill out the color selection nicely. I still think a couple of those yellow shades could have been turned into lighter orange tones or another shade of yellow ochre, or even better, a bright cyan blue. But in the end, all the other color groups were well represented, not only with different hues, but different saturation and values as well. Some standout colors that I want to mention: Chartreuse, which is a really unique intense green shade without leaning into neon colors. There's both old gold and antique brass that are muted green ochre shades that you'll see come in handy during my portrait blending process. The Mars brown and Venetian red are great saturated mid-tone browns. There's cloud blue and helio turquoise light, which are blue-green gray tones, and there's a beautiful shade called quinacridone violet for an intense shadow shade. My absolute favorites are the turquoise gray and caddet blue. These are the kinds of shade I tend to reach for when drawing two-tone sketches. Honestly, the entirety of the green selection is amazing, with bright turquoises and that chartreuse I mentioned, pastel hues, deep forest shades, muted green browns. The longer I look at these, the better suited this set looks for landscape drawings too. There's a lot of blue shades, some are a bit similar to each other, and overall the blue selection is slightly less exciting, if that makes sense, as there were fewer standout colors to me. I was missing some really intense, bright cyan blue. The purples and dark reds are another standout for me, especially the transition from dark reds to browns with terracotta, burnt sienna and similar hues looks very well balanced. Also, and I absolutely love this entire section, there's a great variety of grey tones and near-neutral shades to blend and mix with. If you've seen any of my previous art videos, you know that I love a good grey tone more than anything else, and this set did not disappoint. I'll point out some favorites later. As for how these felt when swatching, I found them to be very consistent overall, with no shades feeling more scratchy or creamy than others. These are wax-based colored pencils, and you can definitely tell from the soft application. Here I compared the black shade of Arrtx to some of my other black colored pencils, the Derwent Lightfast, Caran d'Ache Luminance, Mako Renoir, Polychromos and Prismacolor. The Arrtx felt like an in-between of the Derwent Lightfast and Prismacolor, in these small swatches at least. Less soft and more precise than the Prismacolor. And it built up easily to a smooth, paper texture covering surface. Like with many cheaper colored pencil options, these don't have lightfastness ratings. Personally, that's not a concern for me at all, as I draw in sketchbooks and this isn't my medium for finished art. But if you're a colored pencil artist or heavily focused on that, you'd probably want to use these for practice only. Here I'm testing out some of those wonderful grey shades that I mentioned, comparing them to my favorite grey tone, a subtle greenish hue that I'm obsessed with. The cadet blue and turquoise grey are a pretty close match, and I really like these two. If you are looking for a mid-tone grey for your own sketches, something that combines well with pencils or warm shades like terracotta, this would be my recommendation right here. Now, if you've watched me go through all these color swatches and the product packaging and presentation, here's a disclaimer. I don't color with colored pencils. I mostly use them as tools for sketches, studies, to bring smudge-free shading and a bit of variety into my mostly pencil sketchbooks, and to layer them on top of watercolor and gouache. If you're looking for specific feedback on how these blend with tools, or even mediums like alcohol or similar materials for use in hyper-realistic colored pencil art or for coloring books, then I'm sadly not the right person to give that to you. I'm testing with two things in mind. Do these layer well on a variety of sketchbook papers so I can draw color studies with them? And can I get expressive lines or textures for sketches? I first tried them out late at night to bring a touch of color to this sketch of a scene from Nosferatu. Combining colored pencils with regular pencils for quick sketches like this is what I do most, and these were soft enough to layer well with my pencil drawing. This paper here is a great litmus test for colored pencil softness, as it can start to peel after a couple layers, and I'd already gone over it pretty harshly for that pencil sketch that I kept erasing. The Arrtx colored pencils, being wax-based and overall soft, created very delicate color layers. While the colors themselves are beautiful, they don't pack as much of a punch as some of the higher-end wax-based colored pencils I've tried, but that's a completely different price range and utility. I picked out two shades, a muted blue and gorgeous wisteria, to finish this small sketch, and I'm happy to report that the Arrtx create beautiful single color textures, something more important to me than a completely smooth blend. So next, the blended and layered approach is what we are testing here. As I loved all of the red, brown, blue and green shades so much during swatching, I went with the opposite, a motif that focuses on the yellow and ochre color range for this test instead, just to see how well these would flow together with the rest of the palette. I'm drawing a color study of Fatima by French artist Jules Lefebvre. Here I'm drawing in my daler-rowney sketchbook. The paper is less textured than my swatch book, but more textured than the smooth Hahnemühle booklet, so that I can see how these colored pencils behave on different surfaces. I think this daler-rowney sketchbook is actually the best fit for them so far, as I needed minimal pressure for the color to build up, and no matter how much I went over certain areas, I didn't have any issues with layering. All the earth tones from yellow ochre to Venetian red, but especially all the darker, more saturated browns, like dark umber, sepia and iron oxide brown, performed beautifully for this portrait. They can build up saturated shadows, never looking chalky or lifeless. All the grey tones I'd already admired as swatches were perfect for layering with more saturated colors, and made it easy to slowly explore this study, and to adjust my colors as I observed more nuance. While these are slightly less soft than some of my other wax-based options, I found that drawing details with very light pressure on top of those color layers I'd built up came very easy. As these are not available in open stock, just as the full set, I was worried that I'd use up certain colors very quickly, but I found that just sharpening each pencil once was enough for this study. These don't wear down quickly while shading, so I hope I'll be able to keep using the full set of colors for a long time, not quickly running out of certain key shades. I ended up not using the white color at all, by the way. It's not an opaque white, especially when compared to my Chinese white here in this swatch. I've also tested it here on toned paper, and yeah, compared to all the other colors in this set, I think the white actually packs the least punch. Here I'm doing some color mixing tests With how intense that green turned out, I'd love to try some limited color palette approaches with these colored pencils. Working with complementary colors only might also be really interesting for future color studies. The Master Study reference has this very beautiful deep ochre tone to the skin, and instead of going for an even representation of that, I tried to vary it as much as I could using pastel blues, olive greens, and as many different yellow shades as possible to create hue shifts and see what works best. I still need to get a better feel for all the different yellows here, though especially the darker shades like chromium, yellow deep, goldenrod and yellow ochre quickly became the ones I reached for most. So if you like to draw portrait sketches and studies like I do, I think this color selection, especially with all the gray tones and the both saturated and desaturated dark browns, is a great fit. I actually got really into this drawing the longer I went, and the Arrtx colored pencils become more pleasant to work with the more I layer them. As for a final feedback, I had 0 issues with splintering or crumbling. They are easy to sharpen and have well-centered cores, a middle-of-the-road feel when it comes to wax-based colored pencils, building up, mixing and layering easily. The packaging is innovative, but could have used some more fine-tuning. And the colors need swatching to be easier to tell apart and organize, as the small silver lettering can be difficult to make out and the color swatches of the packaging are quite inaccurate. Very consistent and intuitive color names focused on traditional pigments help with separating these colors, though no actual pigment information or light fastness ratings are available. So I'd imagine especially pinks and reds will fade quickly. While not available open stock for single color repurchases, these aren't so buttery that specific shades would immediately be sharpened down to nothing. There's a very impressive range of greens, reds, browns and grey tones, a slightly more basic selection of blues, yellows in absolute abundance, and some effect colors that I probably won't use that often. 3 fluorescent neon shades as well as gold and silver, though I did actually end up using the gold for shading parts of the background of my study here, and it's a very pretty, subtly shimmering ochre. With that overall color balance in mind, I'd definitely recommend the 126 color set, as the 72 color set's balance looks more skewed towards yellow. These were really enjoyable to draw with for these sketches, and while I'm no colored pencil expert by any measure, I really like the result when it comes to color variety and blending. I'm really glad to finally have a set of colored pencils instead of my random collection of single shades, and hope to experiment with these on top of watercolors, gouache and even alcohol markers in the future. Thank you again to Arrtx for sending me this set to review and give my honest opinion on, and thank you for watching as I took my first steps into proper colored pencil blending for studies. I'm very excited to continue studying colors and values in mixed media, and that these are now part of my toolbox for exactly that. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in future art videos.